When it is that time of the month, I get into the shower and I scoop as much out as I can as possible because I don't want to deal with it.
You have to be really careful with the sort of pH and what you're putting up inside the body.
My Auntie Annie, she used to say, so you couldn't ever.
Are you on yet?
It wasn't a word.
The stem cells that we have in menstrual fluid are unique and they're amazing.
Hello and welcome to Strange Health from The Conversation, the show where we explore all the weird and wonderful stuff that your body gets up to. I'm Katie Edwards, I'm Health and Medicine Editor at The Conversation in the UK, and we're an independent source of news and analysis, powered by academics and journalists, working together to make evidence accessible.
I'm Dan Baumgardt and I'm a GP and lecturer in health and life sciences at the University of Bristol.
Well, have we got an episode for you? So, I've been inspired by the viral hack, the period hack, that's gone online just a couple of weeks ago about period scooping. Now, if...
Period scooping?
Yeah, you heard. So let's watch a video and find out what it is.
When it is that time of the month, I get into the shower and I scoop as much out as I can as possible because I don't want to deal with it. And to me, it's just easier to reach up in there and scoop out as much as I can. And I do it every morning during that time of the month. And then I barely have any sort of residual action throughout the day.
Dan, have you ever heard of the scoop?
Never before. First time.
Sounds a bit uncomfortable, but anyway, if it works for it, but I that's a new one.
No, and to each their own, and it's very much a new one for me.
Indeed.
And I've never heard anybody in a clinical setting mention it either.
You can be the one, Dan.
Now I can.
Right, we've also got, in addition, so a very different approach to period blood.
Oh, so not scooping?
No, we're not scooping now. No.
Oh, right, okay.
We're putting it on his face. Well, we aren't. Me and you. I'm not going to ask. We're not going to do it right now. But apparently, it's got stem cells in it, period blood, and that it's got really good stuff in it.
Okay.
So to try and take advantage of all that, putting it on the face for really good skin.
Right.
All right, girls. So it's that time of the month where I've saved up all of my period, and I'm putting it on my face as a face mask because you guys know how detoxifying all of that is.
Did you say you're going to put your period on your face?
Yeah, I've saved up all my period for my detoxifying mask.
And that's what you're filming right now?
Yeah, it's like a little period get ready with me.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
That's your period.
Yeah. Most girls do it in private, but I thought I'd just talk about it.
You're not messing with me right now?
No!
How long have you been doing that for then?
So there we'd got a couple who were just getting ready in the bathroom, and the woman was doing a period get ready with me, which, I'm sure we've all been there. She'd apparently saved it all up in a Tupperware, and then she was applying it to her face, and her boyfriend didn't seem to, it was news to him, and she tried to put a bit on his face, and he let her put a bit on his face, and then he gagged. But there's loads in there, isn't there? Because there's the kind of taboo thing about period blood, about that it's dirty, that you don't want it getting on your body. A bit, it's a bit like the idea that it's abject, so it's like disgusting stuff. It's gross, and then also there's the idea that it's a waste product from the body, that it's like poo. What did you think, Dan?
Well, I think the look on his face said everything. I think that's probably the reaction that I sort of had. Absolutely no idea that was coming up. But when you think about it, it is a natural product of our body's function. It's there for a reason. It's there to clear out the inside of the uterus, and it's regulated by hormones in the menstrual cycle. So it is a natural byproduct of life and of, daily routine. So what I'm sort of struggling to get to grips with is the sort of like the confirmation of how much evidence there is behind it being good on your face.
As far as I'm concerned, if people want to put, period blood all over the face, it's like fill your boobs. But apparently dermatologists say it's not a great idea because you can get allergies. There's bacteria, obviously. And if you're saving period blood up, there's a chance that actually you're going to start introducing stuff that wasn't there in the first place. So, I mean, to be honest, if I thought it were going to be good, I would have a go at it.
Yeah, I think that most people are going to be passing on that.
Okay, so I wanted to find out more about what's going on with these period hacks. Like, can you actually shorten your period? What kind of, benefits does menstrual blood have? So I've been speaking to an expert in menstruation for our Ask the Expert section. Hi, Sally King. So you're a medical physiologist and visiting fellow at King's College in London. You're an expert in menstruation. So, Sally, period scooping. So this is a massive trend on TikTok right now. It's going viral. Can you tell me what is going on there?
I think a lot of TikTok depends on things being taboo or slightly kind of exciting topics. And because periods are sadly taboo topic, even though they're perfectly healthy and normal, it can attract attention. When I was looking at the TikTok videos, there were actually 3 different things that I saw being talked about under this heading of period scooping. So one of them is simply using your pelvic floor muscles. So those are the muscles inside your body, down at the bottom, that you can sort of clench and release. And the idea is that you can somehow control the volume of blood and when it comes out. For example, people saying either when they're in the shower or on their loo, they'll sort of push using those core muscles to get rid of as much menstrual fluid as possible. And they're kind of implying that this shortens your period in some way. But that's not technically true. You can't shorten your period. The period is the lining of the womb coming away, along with some blood and other liquid. You can't affect that by what you're doing down below in your vaginal canal. But it's sort of about getting rid of as much menstrual fluid as you can, perhaps before going to work or going swimming, something like that. So it's kind of true that you can do that. That's absolutely fine. It's not dangerous. To be honest, there's nothing new about that. People have sort of found that by themselves for many years and haven't sort of branded it scooping. But there was another sort of couple of things which were a bit more sort of challenging and some of them even sort of harmful. One of them was talking about scooping as if you would use water, so maybe using a shower head or water when you're bathing to wash up inside the vagina to sort of clean out menstrual fluid from within the vagina. This again isn't new. It's actually a practice called douching. It's relatively popular in France and in the US, for example, but not so much here in the UK. It's really not very good for you. So it's bad for your reproductive health. People have even found problems with maintaining pregnancies, lots of infections, so bacterial vaginosis or thrush, but even serious infections that go on to become pelvic inflammatory disease can be caused by using water and particularly soap or detergents inside the vagina. And that's kind of well established in science that you should never clean or wash out the inside your body in the vagina.
Is that because you're introducing bacteria?
It relates to bacteria, but it's not that you're introducing things. The vagina is a self-cleaning part of the body, and it has an acidic pH, whereas water is neutral. When you're putting water inside, you're changing the pH of that environment, which changes which bacteria live there. So you're sort of harming the good bacteria that your body is naturally producing and tend to live in the vagina most of the cycle and while you're of reproductive age. By changing the pH, you're increasing the more sort of higher levels of more harmful bacteria associated with infections. And then soap is alkali. If you're not rinsing out properly, it would be quite harmful to leave bits of soap, for example, inside the vagina. And this goes for things like people use Dettol, quite strong detergents. All of these things come from a sort of place of shame, I think. The idea that that part of the body is dirty, which is kind of the opposite. It's intrinsically self-cleaning.
There's so much social stigma around that. So you can imagine why somebody might resort to using Dettol, for example.
Yeah, and sometimes people's mothers say this is what you should do. You know, there are lots of places where, for instance, water isn't particularly clean. And so adding Dettol to bath water would be just a normal thing that people did. Fine. And again, as long as you're not sloshing it inside the vagina in any way, you can clean your outside part of your body, which is the vulva. Absolutely fine. And letting water wash over the outside of the vaginal opening, fine. We're talking about anything pushing or or putting soap or water, or even, sadly, these sort of femwash products, things that are actively marketed. They're not the right pH, they're not acidic pH, so you shouldn't really be putting anything like that inside the vagina.
And Sally, I've seen people on social media talking about using the fingers or even, objects to try and scoop out menstrual fluid. Is there any evidence behind that?
Well, this is something that you can do. Again, you have to be really careful with the sort of pH and what you're putting up inside the body. This is a practice that has happened for probably forever, since people have been having periods, that particularly if you get heavier periods, you might not want the flow to be super heavy at any given moment. If you can sort of feel like there's blood in the vaginal canal, which again, if you have heavier flow, you can kind of feel a sort of heaviness, it's called sometimes, in the body, then some people seem to be now, under the term of scooping, removing that menstrual fluid from the vaginal canal with their fingers and things. My main sort of take home from watching these videos and influencers speak is, why do we need to do this? We've had loads of sort of developments in period products over the last 20 or so years. So particularly menstrual cups being really, really great, even for heavy periods, for swimming, for any sort of exercise. We have period pants, which are super absorbent. Some of them now you can have very heavy periods and people notice that there's no smell, sort of unlike what can happen with disposable products. If people aren't being taught in school about different period products, how to use them, how to wash the vulva and not to wash the vagina and why not, how to manage if you do get an infection, what should or shouldn't be sort of put inside the vagina. The fact that this is your body, it's a nice part of your body, it's not necessarily anything to do with sex, it's just a part of you, and it shouldn't be this kind of shameful experience having a period. And so we need to actively challenge that in our teaching and in our way that we think about our own bodies too.
And there are times, when for convenience, if you're going on a holiday or, like you said, you want to exercise or whatever, and people are attempting to shorten the period cycle by taking drinks. And these drinks are like lime juice and tagine powder, which I think is like a kind of mixture of lime and salt. And you usually kind of put it on fruit or something. So they're using that to shorten periods, which, it doesn't sound like it's going to have that much scientific backing to me.
No, it has none.
I
mean,
okay.
You don't really have to be a menstrual physiologist to realise that anything you put in this hole doesn't stand much of a chance of getting into the vagina. What we swallow goes into the stomach. You have really strong stomach acids up there that are capable of digesting really most things. Periods are not always the same, even for an individual. So you might do this shot drink, and then the next day you have very scant bleeding, or it's just a bit different, and you think it works. This sort of confirmation bias where you're led to believe that something works and that there's a connection between two things, and then you're almost looking for evidence to support that belief. But the thing with periods is they're very changeable. The older you get, the more that you have, you realise that there's no rhyme nor reason, unless, as you say, if you've booked a swimming holiday, then you're probably going to be on your period. There's the sort of the curse of the ill-timed period sometimes does strike. And I noticed some of the influencers were saying, it might not work for everyone, but for me, and they're really hedging their bets there, it's not going to work for anybody. Anything that you're eating cannot have a direct and immediate effect on your menstrual cycle or your blood flow. But with the caveat of an anti-inflammatory diet, if you stick to a nice anti-inflammatory diet, which is really a healthy diet, so lots of fresh fruit and veg, less processed food, low alcohol, low caffeine, and then anti-inflammatory medications, so such as ibuprofen. And then there are specific drugs for people, for instance, with very heavy periods that do reduce the volume of blood that you lose in your period. And they do that through an anti-inflammatory action. So, for instance, there are some supplements you can take, like omega fish oils, even sort of turmeric and things, but the dosage you have to have of turmeric is massive. Really, you're better off sticking to ibuprofen. if you want to reduce the volume of menstrual blood. And also pain and other cyclical changes that we experience, they're all inflammatory. So anti-inflammatory diet can work, but it's not this immediate stopping.
Does it do any damage to continue a contraceptive pill and not have your period? Because that's another thing that I've heard on social media was that you have to have your period, because if you don't have it, then dreadful things will happen inside you.
Yeah, super interesting. So the origins of this are very much misogyny and anti-women's health, so anti the pill, basically. So you'll see a lot of well-being and fitness influencers, for example, sort of taking a half-truth, which is that periods are a sign of health. Certainly, if you're very ill, you might stop getting periods. For instance, if you have an eating disorder or anorexia, or you're in a very stressful situation, your body might not ovulate, and then you might stop having periods because your body's thinking you're in too much of a sort of dangerous situation. It wouldn't be safe to, for instance, get pregnant. But it doesn't mean that you should have periods. So actually, a lot of my work is explaining to people and slightly blowing their minds that periods evolved to help protect us from the dangers of pregnancy and childbirth. Whereas I think most people are taught that periods somehow help prepare for a pregnancy. Not true. The period removes everything from inside the womb, including any eggs, which are typically not fertilized. But sometimes, even when they are, it's action. It's very similar to miscarriage. We evolved them to help us identify and mitigate the risk of dangerous pregnancies. So they're either dangerous to our health or unviable for whatever reason. Like the fetus isn't viable. So only if you're trying to conceive do you really have to worry about having regular periods, because that's what it's evolved for. But that doesn't mean that you have to have periods. And certainly all the research suggests that running your pill on so that you skip a period doesn't cause any harm at all. What can happen if, say you're getting married and you don't normally use the pill and you use it so that you definitely not got your period during your wedding day, that can mess with your natural rhythms. So if you do that and then stop taking the pill again, it might take a few cycles, 2 to 3 cycles, before you're back into a normal rhythm. And in the meantime, you might have a short cycle or a really long cycle. And that's just to do with your circadian rhythm. There's no health impact of stopping a period, or, for instance, some contraceptive devices such as Mirena or some of the progestin shots, they stop periods in most people, and to no negative effect. And in fact, if, like me, you're anemic or low in iron, it can be very helpful to stop that, just so you can restore those iron levels.
You see, Sally, I love this about your research. It is so refreshing, and it's a perspective that I just hadn't heard before I read your work. I'd never come across that explained like that. Like you say, at school and, well, everything, it's always been about, this is your body getting ready for pregnancy.
It's tough because that's also what medics are currently taught.
Yes.
So, my recent research is looking at textbooks used in medical education in the UK. And first of all, I did a review looking at their menstrual physiology, what's taught about menstruation, for instance. Are we told that its purpose is actually the removal of the contents of the womb, including any eggs, and therefore contraceptive, if you want to give it a technical term, or abortive even in terms of removing potential conception? And the answer is no. They're not given that physiology. And then more recently, I reviewed the content of all reproductive functions, and the pattern was the same. So any reproductive physiology or functions that are not about conception and having babies are not currently included in general medical education or even gynecological education. So nothing on fibroids, nothing on miscarriage, the physiology of miscarriage, nothing on the role of periods and why we have them.
On the other side, there's a movement on social media to kind of celebrate menstrual blood, really celebrate periods. And that's included period masking, which, as you'll know, involves putting menstrual blood on your face, which some influencers swear will really improve your skin somehow. What's going on there, Sally?
I quite like this one. And as far as fads going, you're not really going to damage anyone, well, other than if you stain anything around you. But menstrual fluid has got stem cells in it. So that's true. That's what most of the influencers are saying, that because menstrual fluid has stem cells in, effectively it's an anti-aging mask. So scientifically, that's not how the skin works. The skin acts as a barrier. Nothing is going to get into the layers that it would need to do anything to stop the formation of wrinkles. So what's interesting, again, we have a kind of half-truth, which is that menstrual fluid, on the contrary to what we're led to believe, that it's this dirty, shameful fluid that's gross and it stains and, you know, it's a sort of signifier of shame, that actually it's this wonderful fluid, which it is. And the stem cells that we have in menstrual fluid are unique and they're amazing. So for instance, every cycle, we're stripping a layer of tissue off the inside of the womb, and then it regenerates without any scarring. Now, this is unique in the body. There's nowhere else in the body where you could slough off a whole layer without there being any scar tissue. So this is why scientists are looking at menstrual fluid and looking at the stem cells in particular to look at wound repair. So particularly heavy burns, deep burns, but even sort of internally, for instance, the type of stem cells we find in menstrual fluid were extracted and used during the COVID pandemic, and they were injected directly into the lung tissue of people who were dying of COVID. This was before any vaccines. And they found that it saved a much higher percentage of lives than the group that weren't given these stem cells. And this was based on the idea that these stem cells, they replicate more quickly than any other type of stem cell, and they also repair without scar tissue. So the idea being that if they could do that in the lung, then people would be more likely to recover and without any kind of permanent damage to the lungs, which was one of the major reasons why people were dying in that initial pandemic time. But I'd say in most cases, we're still in very much the sort of research stage, looking at the use of those stem cells. So the idea that it would already be available on the market, for example, just wouldn't be true. And just rubbing it on your face isn't the same thing. You need a way to get those stem cells inside. And I'm not suggesting anybody injects themselves in menstrual fluid either. Just calm down. We all age, we all die. Sorry if this is a shock to you. It's just life. And life is wonderful. You know, I quite liked that idea that menstrual fluid not only wasn't taboo, but that you would put it on your face. I thought it was kind of great. It's just a shame that there's no truth behind that actually being a useful thing.
Just calm down. We all age.
Yeah. So because menstruation is seen as a taboo product or a part of the body, but also if people dismissed it as not important, like as effluent, people think of it like wee or poo, which it isn't.
So it's not waste.
It's not waste, no. It's and for instance, in other menstruating species, some of them reabsorb the tissue instead of having a strong period, so there might be some spotting. But for whatever reason, we have much heavier periods compared to even our other primate cousins. So, and we also die in pregnancy and childbirth at much, much higher rates than other primates, and in fact any other menstruating species.
What are the other menstruating species then? It's not just primates, is it?
Menstruation is very rare, so it's only 1.6% of mammals that can menstruate. So it's primates, so orangutans, gorillas, chimps, bonobos, some old world monkeys, so that's smaller monkeys, some bats, so not all bats, but some bats. There's the spiny mouse, which is the only rodent to have a period, and it cycles only every 9 days. I always feel really sorry for it.
Yeah.
But it only has little bits of blood, so humans really, we have to have
as if it's
periods.
Not bad enough being called a spiny mouse.
Oh, but it's very sweet. It's got it's a very gorgeous little mouse. And also the elephant shrew, it looks like a rodent, hence it's called a shrew, but actually they're related to elephants. So it's interesting that menstruation has evolved several different times on different family genetic lines, and people think dogs have periods because dogs go on heat, and it's a completely different thing. So when a dog is on heat, it's blood and other sort of bits of fluid coming from the vagina. It's not the lining of the womb. It's just blood and other highly scented elements that are indicating to dogs, because dogs are very nose-oriented species. They can smell that the female dog is in heat, which means that they're fertile. So actually, it's advertising that they're ovulating. So it's a completely different thing. We're not like dogs on heat at all. And the other very interesting thing is humans, we conceal ovulation. So most mammals, nearly all mammals, show in some way when they're ovulating, either with a big red bottom or very clear behavioural changes, scent, smells, all sorts of different things. Whereas we've evolved so that even we don't know if we've ovulated or not. We have no idea. And a lot of our cycles don't have ovulation. And you only sort of know if you have a lighter period, for example, with less pain, it probably means that you didn't ovulate. Or if you're trying to conceive, then you suddenly become aware that you are or you are not ovulating.
Sally, I'm just trying to be cool about it, but you kind of have blown my mind now. But if I'd have heard about it when we were younger, that would have put a whole different perspective on it, instead of it, being weaponized as something to bully girls with instead. So apart from the COVID pandemic, what kind of evidence is there about these beneficial effects of menstrual blood?
This is a lovely news story, really, that should come out, is that by looking at menstrual fluid, we're hoping to be able to more quickly and more effectively diagnose a whole range of health conditions, things like endometriosis or adenomyosis, which are super painful and people can suffer for decades, years and years. And if you could just collect some menstrual fluid in a cup, send it to your doctor or whoever's going to do the test, and they can immediately say, yeah, we think you have endometriosis, then they can take preventative steps. So it doesn't get any worse. You can suppress your cycle. You have a range of different options when you're possibly still a teenager, instead of having to wait to your sort of mid-30s, late 30s, when the damage is, already been done.
That has been absolutely brilliant, Sally. It just makes me so sad that kids aren't taught this, because it would give a whole different perception of girls' and women's bodies.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
Well, I really loved talking to Sally, Dan, because she had got such an unusual perspective, but it shouldn't be unusual. Like, I shouldn't be at this age just finding these things out about menstruation. I mean, you've been to medical school. Did you hear the kind of theories that Sally was talking about? Were they discussed?
Not really. I think that what we learned at medical school was a little bit more matter of fact. So looking at the functions of menstruation, and there's some of the messages that she was getting across, that actually having a period is just a sign of normal health, and there's so much variation in between women, not just in their cycle, but also in the amount of blood that they're producing each cycle, and the fact that it can be so variable between different individuals.
As you'll have heard, Sally was saying that she quite liked the idea of period masking because it was, kind of celebration of something that's still to this day seen as taboo, still something that's seen as dirty, still something that we don't talk about. And, we're only just getting adverts on TV where we're actually showing blood and not some kind of blue fluid. And even then, I've been sitting with people when those adverts came on and they've gone mad about them and said, I can't believe this. I mean, they were men. I can't believe this. This is disgusting to have this on TV, especially around tea time.
No, absolutely. But again, it is like blue fluid being poured onto a pad. That's not what happens in real life, is it, at the end of the day? And actually, if period masking makes us turn around and think about the fact that periods happen, they happen on a regular basis, and there's something to be normalised, not to be discredited or made taboo, then that's a good thing, isn't it?
Or trivialised. Because that's another thing, isn't it? It's about, women talking about pain and it being dismissed, especially when it's pain around periods. I mean, I remember the school nurse at school, whatever you said, you could go like with your head, like holding your own head, and she'd go like, is it your period? Have you had a poo? So it's always been, you know, this kind of trivial thing, this way of dismissing pain, this way of dismissing women's experiences as well. My Auntie Annie, who was Brill, she used to say, that's what she'd say. So you couldn't ever.
Are you on yet?
It wasn't a word, but also the other word that we couldn't say was pregnant, and pregnant.
Did you hear about her next door? She had and got pregnant.
Yeah, absolute filth. Yeah. So when you see people about the period, then Dan, what are the main things that you're asked about?
One of the things is, do you think I've got heavy periods? Average menstrual volume is around about 30 to 40 mils. So when you think about that as being sort of 2 to 3 tablespoonfuls of blood, but actually that's really difficult to gauge, isn't it?
Yeah, and also like how do we even get to that number? Like that seems a bit arbitrary, doesn't it? It just seems a bit.
Yeah. It does seem arbitrary because, again, the loss is so variable between women, and also what you consider to be heavy bleeding is around about 80 mils. When you think that some people donate blood and they can donate 400, 500 mils of blood, 80 mils might seem quite small in comparison to that, but some women can cope with losing a larger amount of blood, and indeed normally lose a larger amount of blood, and some people that makes a significant difference. I mean, having periods over a long period of time with heavy volumes can make you anemic, and it can make you feel really quite unwell.
But also, if you're used to having quite light periods and then you suddenly do have something that feels very heavy for you, it doesn't matter like how many millilitres it is, it's a big change, isn't it? So you should go and see if there's anything happening.
And I think that's why it's very difficult sometimes for women to gauge whether they've got larger amounts of bleeding or smaller amounts of bleeding.
And, you know your body the best, don't you? So you know what's out of character and what you'd be expecting.
Yeah, when we take that value of greater than 80 mils per cycle, it's estimated that if you were basing your statistics around that about 10% of women have what we call menorrhagia, heavy periods. But actually, women who present thinking they've got heavy periods, that counts for around about a third of women, so around about 30 or 33%. So there's a discrepancy there. And I think that part of it as well is changes in cycles that we notice, so changes in volumes of bleeding, changes in how regular their cycle's been. And those are the things that most women, I think, who present with concerns about their periods ask about.
Yeah, and I suppose it's also, again, a measurement, it doesn't really matter that much if something's affecting your life a lot. Are there any other medical conditions that can affect periods then?
Part of it as well can come from underlying disease or other conditions, sometimes outside of the reproductive organs. So one of the other things, we talked about heavy periods and we talked about pain, but what we can also see as well is that some patients present to their doctors concerned that their periods have become less frequent or that they're not getting them at all. So oligomenorrhea is when your periods become less frequent, and amenorrhea is when they stop. So what could be the cause? Amenorrhea, one of the first ones, of course, we need to think of is pregnancy. Other things that can happen is that because your menstrual cycle is controlled by your pituitary gland, which is a little brown gland on the base of your brain, and it's also controlled by your ovaries, your reproductive organs, what it's important to do is potentially screen for those sorts of conditions. But vastly more common are actually the changes that we have in our lifestyle and what our daily living is like.
Your eating, exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. So weight comes into it. And interestingly, changes in your cycle can be found at the sort of the opposites of the weight spectrum. So weight loss and weight gain can cause changes in your cycle, can make it become less frequent. Starvation as well, and patients who are anorexic, who are not eating large amounts or resorting to purging in order to vomit, can also impact your periods. So too can lots of intense exercise. So patients who do lots and lots and lots of exercise, things like professional gymnasts, or people like ballet dancers who do lots and lots of exercise and who are thin, usually at the lower end of the spectrum of weight, can usually find that their periods may become less frequent or stop altogether. And that's because the exercise is switching on lots and lots of stress hormones, and the stress hormones suppress the ovarian cycle.
So then, Dan, what have we learned in this episode? Well, periods aren't trivial. They're definitely not one size fits all, although you can speak to anyone who has periods and they'll tell you that for free. People who live with periods know things that medicine's still catching up with. There's no kind of single normal period, and there are no magic shortcuts to better skin by putting period blood on your face. If there was, I'd be wearing it right now. And there's a lot more that science can still do around women's reproductive health.
Quite right.
Huge thanks to Sally King from King's College. She actually runs a website, Dan, called Menstrual Matters, and that's got loads of myth busting and it's got loads of information about menstrual health. So everybody go and check that out. It's menstrual with a little dash matters.com.
And this is the last episode of the first series of Strange Health. It's been an absolute blast. So thank you everybody who's been listening over the last couple of weeks. And while we're off air, we'd still love to hear from you. If you've seen a health claim that you've seen online and thought, that cannot possibly be right, email us at strangehealth, all one word or lowercase, at theconversation, also all one word, .com.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, leave us a review and share it with your friends and family because it helps us reach more people.
Strange Health is produced by Gemma Ware, with editing and mixing by Anouk Millet and artwork by Alice Mason.
Thanks loads for listening. Bye.
Until next time, bye guys.